Welcome to the Virginia Virtual Farm to Table program. My name is Eric Benfeld, and I am an extension specialist for community viability based in Harrisonburg, Virginia. This educational program will highlight Virginia agriculture, community nutrition, and farm to table connections, and is brought to you by Virginia Cooperative Extension, an educational outreach program of Virginia's land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. The purpose of the Virginia Virtual Farm to Table program is to highlight Virginia grown produce and livestock that are raised on farms across the Commonwealth and demonstrate how to create a delicious and nutritious meal with a highlighted ingredient. Virginia Cooperative Extension's educational programs are delivered through a network of faculty at these two universities, 108 county and city offices, 11 agricultural research and extension centers, and 6 4-H educational centers. I encourage all of you to participate in your local Virginia Cooperative Extension programs to learn more if you have not already. Today, we'll be learning about what is the buzz about bees. Thank you for joining us as we explore the world of bees and learn more about the buzz that they create in our world. Today, you will learn from Extension agents Amber Wilson, Becky Gardner, and Robbie Morrison about the importance of bees as pollinators, how bees are important to Virginia's agriculture, where to purchase honey, the health benefits of honey, and how your family can get involved in beekeeping in your own backyard. We will also hear from Jeff Brown, a beekeeper from Franklin County, Virginia, who will demonstrate tools and techniques for successfully starting and maintaining beehives. Robbie Morrison, 4-H Extension Agent for Youth Development in Campbell County, will also spotlight what Campbell County 4-H members are doing with a beekeeping project. Becky Gardner, an extension agent and beekeeper from Culpeper, Virginia, will provide some expertise on best management practices for beekeeping and also highlight how beekeeping industry supports agriculture in Virginia. And we're also pleased to have Alani Atkins, Family and Consumer Science and SNAP Ed Education Extension Agent from Danville City, Virginia. She'll be sharing a recipe and demonstrating how to make a delicious honey pumpkin bars for your family. And so, as I mentioned, we're glad to have Amber Wilson. She's a 4-H Extension Agent from Franklin County, Virginia. Becky Gardner, a Family and Consumer Science Agent from Culpeper County and Unit Coordinator in the Piedmont area. Robbie Morrison is a 4-H Extension Agent in Campbell County, and Alani Atkins, a Family and Consumer Science SNAP Education educator in Danville. So at this point, I welcome you and turn it over to Amber Wilson.
Good afternoon. My name is Amber Wilson, and I'm the 4-H agent in Franklin County, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today to share the buzz about bees. In today's session, you will learn about honey production facts, honeybees and why they are so important, beekeeping basics, tips for purchasing honey, and a recipe for a honey of a pumpkin bar. According to the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, there are 3 types of honey producers in the state of Virginia. Hobbyists account for 92% of beekeepers in our state, and hobbyists have a small operation, generally 1 to 50 beehives. Sideline beekeepers account for approximately 6% of the honey production in the state of Virginia. They have a larger operation, having 50 to 200 beehives. And these folks generally do use honey as a way to supplement their income. Next, we have commercial bee producers our beekeepers in the state of Virginia, which accounts for about 2% of our honey production. And these commercial producers have much larger operations, generally 500 to 1,000 beehives in their operation. According to the USDA, we had 5,000 colonies in Virginia in 2019. The average annual honey production per beehive is about 40 pounds of honey. Now keep in mind that beekeepers will leave 100 to 200 pounds of honey in the hive for the bees to use as food each year. And of course, this depends on the size of the hive that they have. The value of honey production in 2019 was more than $1.4 million in the state of Virginia. And according to the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, this includes honey produced by both sideline beekeepers as well as commercial beekeeping operations. A fun fact about honeybees is that honeybees are the only insect to produce food for humans. And although we associate honey production with honeybees, their true value is in their ability to pollinate crops. 1 out of every 3 bites of food at the dinner table is attributed to the pollination of crops. Honeybees enable the production of at least 90 commercially grown crops in the United States. And honeybees are essential pollinators for about 1/3 of Virginia's fruit and vegetable crops, which adds tens of millions of dollars to Virginia's economy each year. So there are 3 types of bees in a beehive. The queen bee is the largest and most important bee in the hive. And you can see a picture of the queen bee there on the side of your slide. The queen bee's sole purpose is reproduction. Queen bees can produce up to 2,500 eggs per day in the summer. You will find worker bees in the beehive. Worker bees are female bees, and they do all the work. They forage for pollen, produce the honey, and protect the hives. Worker bees have the ability to establish new queens at any time. Finally, we have drones. Drones are the male bees. Drones do not do any work in the hive, but they of course live in the hive, and their sole purpose is to mate with the queen. And they do die shortly after they mate with the queen. And on this picture here, you will see that our queen bee has a pink dot. This is what beekeepers do. It's called marking the queen. Now, this doesn't hurt or damage the queen bee in any way. What it does is it allows the beekeeper to easily find the queen bee in the hive. And also, beekeepers will use a different color to indicate different years so that they will know how old the queen bee is. So next, we are going to take a closer look at beekeeping in action. We are going to hear from Jeff Brown. Jeff Brown is a beekeeper here in Franklin County, Virginia, and he is a member of the Moonshine Beekeepers Association. Jeff works at Windy Gap Apiary, producing honey for the apiary.
Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Brown with the Moonshine Beekeepers Association out of Franklin County, Virginia. We're coming to you from Windy Gap Apiary here today. And I don't know if you can tell, but I got a swarm right over my shoulder here. So some of you might be wondering, just what is a beehive? A beehive, much like your own home, is a place where honeybees call their home. They do all the same functions that we as human beings do in our homes. It's a place that gives them shelter from the elements. It's a climate-controlled atmosphere. They're able to control the temperature inside to a condition that's perfect for them. It's also a location where they eat, tend to their young, raise and rear young. It's a place where they also die. So beehive can be a multitude of things in this world. For the modern day beekeeper, a beehive is simply a series of wooden boxes. Those wooden boxes are usually comprised of an area called a brood chamber. And you may have multiple brood chambers, like on this particular hive we're running here. It has 2 brood chambers and a honey super on top. And I'll just show you the different components here on the camera. So the yellow portion you see at the bottom is called a bottom board. The next portion you see about 2 inches tall up, it's green in color. That is called a slatted rack. A slatted rack provides a little bit of extra room for the honeybees to be able to help them regulate temperature, whether it be the summertime or the wintertime. Our next box you see here is the brood chamber. This particular hive that is a 10 frame deep brood chamber. It has 10 frames of comb in there, and the comb is where the honeybees raise their young, feed them, store carbohydrates and protein alike, and that would be the carbohydrates would be the honey that they store, and the protein is from pollen from trees. Okay, so our next apparatus in the hive, in a man-made hive here, if you see the brown line below this box here in the upper box, that little brown line that's about an 1/8 inch tall, that is what they call a queen excluder. So the queen, she lays eggs in these bottom 2 boxes here. We have the queen excluder to keep the queen out of the top box, so she cannot lay eggs up there. So this top box is what you call a honey super. The honey super is where the worker bees produce their honey. So as a beekeeper, we don't want to have larvae, or we don't want to have a condition where they can raise young in, so we put the queen excluder on. That keeps brood-free honey up here for the beekeeper, hopefully to be able to harvest. And our final part of the beehive this is a telescoping top. This telescoping top, that simply means it's made a little bit larger than the top box, and it can telescope back and forth as there's an entrance on the very top inner cover, which you cannot see on this hive right now. Let's go through a few basic tools with you here. Just a few of the common tools that a beekeeper would need. Now, first off, you have your hive tool. It's good for prying the frames apart and for cleaning off of wax and propolis off the frames by scraping. Here's a set of grippers to pick up frames. It's also got a nice prying tool on the end of it. And your bee brush. And nothing like your smoker being a beekeeper. This is what calms your bees down and gets them interested in things other than you as the beekeeper. Additional safety gear for beekeeping many folks utilize would be a bee suit and or jacket with veil and bee gloves. The queen is the largest bee in the colony. You'll notice the queen roughly the center of the frame with a golden brown abdomen, and she's the longest bee that you see photoed here. She's the most important bee in the colony due to her egg-laying abilities. Though you may think that the queen controls the colony, the worker bees are actually in control and have the ability to replace the queen at any time. The queen's primary task for her entire life is to lay eggs for reproduction to make new bees.
Okay, and here we see Jeff using a capping tool, and this capping tool is going to be used to allow the honey to come out of the frames. And next, he is putting the frames into a honey extractor. And this extractor is going to remove the honey from the frames and allow it to be collected, strained, and bottled. Look at all of that gorgeous honey. I would like to turn the program over to Becky Gardner. Becky is going to share with us some of the ways that we can help bees.
Hi, everybody. Glad you joined us today. So I'm going to talk about what you can do to help bees. It's something we all can do. And like we said earlier, I am a beekeeper. My husband and I have several hives in our backyard. And here's some of the things we have done to help our bees. So you can attract bees to your yard by planting native plants and flowers and trees. The native plants are more attractive to the bees and produce more pollen. And I like to plant perennials so they come back year after year. And there's just a few examples of some ones that are here. Then you want to make sure you plant things that bloom all the way from spring to fall. And then also look at planting different variety of shapes and colors of flowers, because different bees are attracted to different things. And we also, not just the honeybees, we want to think about bumblebees and other pollinators too. So plant a variety of things. So some more things you can do is you can make a bee bath. I don't know if you knew this, but bees need water. They take the water back to the hive and they use it to help cool their hive, because a beehive inside of it is 10 degrees hotter than the outside temperature. So if it's 80 degrees today outside, it's 90 degrees inside that hive, and it gets very hot. So that's what they need the water for. So to make a bee bath, you can take a shallow container. Do not use metal. Use ceramic, glass, or even plastic. And then put some rocks or marbles in it and just a little bit of water. You don't want to submerge the things in the marbles or rocks in the water, because you just want the bees to be able to get to the edge to get water. And also replace it often, because it does get kind of dirty. And this also helps keep bees out of people's pools. My bees like to go visit my neighbor's pool, so I keep water close by so they stay out of their pool, and keeps my neighbors happy too. The other thing you can do is, in the springtime, please don't get rid of the dandelions. I know a lot of people like the pretty yards, but the dandelions are great for the bees. Especially in the spring, they are some of the first flowers that come out, and they're really, really important. So please keep the dandelions and clover in your yard too. My yard's full of clover right now, which is wonderful because it makes wonderful clover honey. So please keep your clover and dandelions. And then limit your use of pesticides. You'll see the bee symbol there. That is the symbol to look for on pesticide labels. It will list if the pesticide is safe for bees, or when to spray, or where not to spray, and what directions to do. A good thing to remember, bees are not active all the time. They go in their hives at dusk and they come out sometimes mid-morning. So if you do have to do any type of spraying around your property, try to do it at dusk or early in the morning when the bees are still in their hives and not out flying around. So swarms happen. It has been a very busy year for swarms this year with beekeepers. It's because we've had hot, cold weather. It goes back and forth. It's been raining. It's been a tremendous year. We've had 8 swarms just with us. Some of them were ours and some were ones that came from other places. So very active year. So it's natural for the bees to swarm. It happens in the spring. It's when they have usually the old queen, they have gotten a new queen and they've kicked the old queen out, and she takes some bees with her. And they're looking for a new home. That's all they're doing. And you'll see them all bunched up as in these pictures. They're protecting the queen. They won't bother you because their whole purpose is to hang there and protect that queen until the scout bees come back and tell them where they should go. They like to go all different places. There's a picture there of one in the trees, And there's one with a rock. That's a rock in my backyard on my patio that I've had 3 swarms go to this year. I call it Bee Rock. That's what we've named it this year. So that's what they're doing. They're just protecting the queen, looking for a home. Do not destroy them. So please don't call an exterminator or anybody like that, or a pest company to come get them. Try to contact a local beekeeping group, which you can find those usually on Facebook. There's lots of them around the state, or call the extension office, because most extension offices keep a swarm list, which is a list of people who will go after and catch swarms. And the picture there of the one with the that's my husband and I catching our first swarm a year ago, and it went to our neighbor's burn barrel. So they kind of go all different places. So start beekeeping. I encourage you to do it. And think of beekeeping is agriculture. You're caring for bees, which is like livestock. So, they're living organisms. It's a lot of fun. I grew up on a farm, so this is my way to get back to the farm a bit. You can see I live in a subdivision, and these are some of my hives in my backyard. I got my little pool there. I have a kiddie pool with things on it for my bees to float in to get their water. We started with just 2 hives, and we've grown this year with catching swarms. We're up to about 8. So we're getting ready to relocate some, but just 3 or 4 in the backyard is just fine. I encourage you to take a class. There are beekeeping groups, some of the associations that offer classes. I encourage you to take a class before you get started, because there's a lot to learn. And you have to remember too, no honey the first year. You have to have your bees an entire year before you get honey. So you have to be patient. Bees, you do need to check on them. You got to feed them, do inspection of the hives, do some maintenance, but they are a lot of fun, and they're really, really neat to watch. And of course, the benefits of the honey is very yummy. So next, we're going to have Robbie Morrison talk about how some 4-H'ers got started in beekeeping in Campbell County. Robbie?
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Yes, I'm very excited to be able to highlight the Campbell County Bee Project. In 2017, Georgia Specific provided a generous grant of over $5,000 for the youth beekeeping. That has become an ongoing project for us. The master beekeepers were Ann Zudikoff and Mark Smith from the Piedmont Beekeepers. They were the leaders of the project. The pictures you see here were provided by Richard Mast and his family, and they're one of the several families who were involved in the project. The initial project was 12 weeks of weekly meetings, and the funding provided the equipment. The equipment costs were really hundreds of dollars, but everything except for the suit to do the beekeeping was provided at no charge for the children. And as long as they committed to attending the classes and successfully completing the hands-on training. Now that training first involved building the homes for the bees during the classes and at home. So they did it at the office where we had the classes, but they also did it at home from completely unassembled parts. And then they painted the exteriors of the boxes. The training continued under Mark and Ann for some time, and the children learned how to install the bees into the hives, and the bees came in packages of several thousand, and they were shipped actually from out of state. The children learned how to place the bees where they would be safe, especially the queen bee, where it would be safe, and they would eventually emerge out of the queen cage. It's just a tiny cage that the queen is shipped in. And they learned how to feed the bees during the first weeks of the new hive, while outside resources were very scarce. And they learned how to inspect the hives, including finding the queen as she was working with her 1,000 worker bees, laying eggs for the next generation. They learned also how to look for and address the honeybee pests as well, because there are things that do like to get into the honeybee boxes and all, so it was a very important part of their training. At the conclusion of the class, after the children had demonstrated that they could take care of the bees, they were able to take the hives home. The project had a great impact on all the participants who are a part of it and are still ongoing. which is demonstrated by a couple of quotes I'd like to share with you from the families who were involved in the project. The first quote is, "Bees have now become a part of our lives. Our kids have learned that honey is a product of a lifetime of work on the part of the bees, and that the bees experience major challenges as a species. What they did in the first year did not bear immediate fruit because, as Rebecca told us, the honey is not collected during the first years of the hive, but the labor brought about later rewards for them." And this is such a great lesson for our children. And the second quote was, "The facts that our children learned and the personal investment change our perspective on bees and on honey. Now, when the kids hear about environmental impacts on bees, it's personal. When it's your bees, honey is no longer just a commodity. It is a tasty byproduct of the work of the species that is critical to the web of life, which for us has brought about a greater respect for these tiny little creatures." These pictures here are pictures of the actual honey from the bees. And actually, it's the mass family that this honey is from. And it's important to note that not all honey is the same. There are numerous places to get honey, like your farmers markets. You can actually go to farms. Some farms have little markets set up on their farms, and you can get it there. You can also get it in the grocery store. But when you're looking for honey, make sure to pay close attention, because some honey is not actual honey, for example, but also some actual honey has been filtered to the point that much of the pollen has been filtered out. Now we'd just like to open up to any questions.
Okay, and we have several questions in the question and answer box and chat box. I'll ask as many as we have time for. The first one is, when you're painting the queen, what kind of paint do you use to mark her?
I'll take that one. It's a special, this is Becky. It's a special paint marker that you purchase to mark the queens. And then it's always advertised, like they said, like Amber said, what color you use for what years.
Is the only way to remove the honey with the use of an extractor, or is there another way to do it?
No, you don't have to use an extractor. An extractor makes it go a lot faster. Some people do comb honey, which is way you actually just cut the comb off the racks and put it in a jar and do it that way. Or you can do like they were showing in the video, you uncap it and just let it drain naturally, and then you can strain it. And the reason people run it through strainers is to get out chunks of wax, any bee parts and things like that. That's the only reason you filter it, so you don't have chunky honey.
Okay, thank you. We had a couple questions related to the bee bath. One was just, you had a picture with some shells or things in there, and then you had your kiddie pool in another picture. So there was some question about what do you need to do to make the bee bath, and then also how do you keep mosquitoes out of it?
Okay, so to make a bee bath, so I have a bigger pool because I have a lot of bees, and I have a flotation, actually found like an old Frisbee that they float on in there. But to make a bee bath, it just needs to be a shallow dish with just a little bit of water, and then you can use rocks, marbles, oyster shells, anything in there, anything for them to land on, pieces of wood. And to keep mosquitoes out, you change it often.
And what types of native flowers do you recommend planting for bees?
Well, Extension has some publications on that. You can look on our, or contact a master gardener would be a good person. Some things to plant are black-eyed Susans, different types of mint. They're not always native, but I'm looking at my notes here real quick. I have that alum, which is another bulb type, but just peonies. Eric, do you know any more on some of those too? I can't off the top of my head, but just native plants, because they're going to be hardier and they're going to take less water as well too. So I would also suggest contact your master gardeners or a master naturalist who can answer those questions too.
Thank you. We had several questions related to locating your beehives. One question, the individual lives in an area where there's a lot of farmland with some pesticides around and was just questioning if it was wise to place beehives in an area where you know there's a lot of pesticides being sprayed.
You need to be aware what's around, and I would talk with your farmers to see what they use. Would be check with them. We have farmland around us, and ours beehives seem to do well. You also, when you're placing a beehive, you need to have a place where you can have a southern exposure. Our beehives, if you notice in the picture, are turned, they face south. So they get the most direct sun and heat, especially in the winter, to keep them warm, because that's one of the hardest problems is overwintering your bees to keep them. So, I would just check and see what kind of crops are being grown around you and what kind of pesticides they're using.
Let's take time for one more question before we play our food video. We do still have several others. We'll try to grab those at the end. But in terms of positioning those hives, would a proximity to train tracks be a problem?
I don't think so. Shouldn't be.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and go into our food preparation segment, and we'll try to circle back around and take care of some of these other questions after that.
Thank you, Amber, Becky, and Robbie for that. And now I'd like to introduce Alani Atkins. Alani is the Family and Consumer Science Agent and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Educator based in Danville, and she'll be sharing a recipe in which you could use honey. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Alani.
Hello, today we'll be doing a recipe called the honey of a pumpkin bar, and it can be found on our website, www.eatsmartmovemoreva.org. You can go ahead and play the video.
Hello, my name is Alani Atkins, and I'm the Family and Consumer Science SNAP-Ed Extension Agent for Virginia Cooperative Extension and the Family Nutrition Program. I am housed in the Danville City Unit, and I cover Halifax County, Pennsylvania County, Henry County, and Martinsville City. Today, we'll be taking our featured food, which is honey, and creating a delicious and nutritious recipe with it. So the recipe we'll be doing today is the honey of a pumpkin bar and can be found on our website, www.eatsmartmovemoreva.org. I really like this recipe because it features 3 of the food groups. It has our fruits, it has our grains, and it also has dairy in it, which means you're getting quite a few of your food groups in one item. I also really enjoy this recipe because it's really portable. It's really, once you make it, you can just pack it and go. And it's also a great snack item. For the ingredients, we have non-stick cooking spray, 2 cups whole wheat flour, 1/3 cup non-fat dry milk, 2½ teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of ground allspice, 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1 cup canned pumpkin, 2/3 cup of honey, 1/2 cup of orange juice, 1/3 cup of canola oil, and 2 eggs. The first thing I had to do was preheat my oven, so my oven is preheated. So the next step is just to combine my flour, my dry milk, my cinnamon, my baking soda, and the rest of the spices. So that will be what I'll do. The first ingredient that goes into my dry mixture is my flour. I have a 1/2 cup measuring spoon, so I'll just use 4 of those to get my full 2 cups of flour. So that's 1. So the next ingredient we'll add is our half a cup of dried milk. Our next ingredient is our ground cinnamon. I'll take 2.5 teaspoons of that. I will also add my 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a half teaspoon of ground allspice, my half teaspoon of ground cloves, and my half teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Okay, and I'm just going to stir that together. Just because I want everything to be combined really nicely. In a separate bowl, I'm going to mix together my pumpkin, honey, juice, oil, and eggs. You can get some really great local honey at your farmer's market, and it's a great way to support the farmers in your area. I like to crack my eggs in a separate bowl so then that way I don't get any shells in my final mixture. Once you add your orange juice, all you have to do is stir it all together till it's well combined. The next step is to gradually add our flour mixture into our pumpkin mixture and to stir until it's smooth. Really make sure you scrape down the sides to make sure you get all that flour incorporated. And this is basically what it looks like. For our next step, we'll spray our baking dish with some nonstick spray so that way we make sure that our bars come cleanly out, and then we'll pour our mixture into our baking dish. I like to use these spatulas to really help me get all the batter out. Now remember, as tempting as this may be, don't eat it right now. Save it till after it's done, because there are raw eggs in this mixture, so you don't want to taste it right now. You want to wait till it's done baking. But I know it's tempting. And you want to kind of smooth it out, make sure it reaches all the corners, try to get it as even as possible. You don't necessarily want one bar that's super thick and another bar that's super thin. You want them to be the same thickness across. And there you have it. I'll put this in the oven that has already been preheated to 350 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes. And we're back. So my pumpkin bars were in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes. We allowed them to cool for an additional 10 minutes before we decided to cut them. And here they are, my honey of a pumpkin bar. This is such a quick and easy recipe that I'm sure your family will love. If you decide to make it, let us know in the comment section down below. I hope you guys learned something new today and found a new way to appreciate honey. Thanks for watching.
Hey, thank you for that, Alani. And now for more buzz about bees, you can find additional information at these following sites on beekeeping, as well as pollinator gardens and what types of wildflowers or flowers and plants to plant to attract those bees. Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Science or Services, has a wealth of information at their website, including the best management practices for beekeepers. There's also a Bee Check apiary registry, and the purpose of this registry is to help enable communication between agricultural producers, pesticide applicators, as well as beekeepers to protect those bees. And beekeepers are encouraged to register their beehives on this registry. Of course, you can find a lot of information from Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I've listed our website there. The Virginia Tech Department of Entomology and Pesticides program also has information on pesticides and pesticide application, as well as the Virginia Beekeepers Association.
Okay, and we have a couple of more questions that we can address now. The first question, do bees have to be fed all the time, just during certain times? Who can answer that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so you do not have to feed them all the time. Right now, there's nectar happening with trees and pollen with the flowers. So we're not feeding bees right now, but you do, after we take honey, we will start feeding them again, especially when it gets dry during the dearth, so that they can start making honey for the winter, because we want them to have the honey, make their own honey and have lots of honey stores. That's what they eat during the winter. And then you don't feed them during the winter. We'll feed them up to about the first frost, and then we'll stop and won't start again until spring.
We have someone who captured their first hive about a month ago, but it was a small hive, a small swarm, and it's only filling about a third of the hive. Is that something where they should just let the queen fill it naturally, or is it possible to purchase a brood to add in there?
You wouldn't purchase another brood, no, because we wouldn't get along. So just let the queen do it naturally.
Okay. And then one big question, are we aware of any beekeeping classes that are going to be offered on Zoom anytime soon?
I don't know of any. I would check with the State Beekeeping Association. They usually have a list of classes too, and that resource was in the last slide.
Okay. And two more questions. One, what is the average bee's lifespan?
A bee lives about 60 days.
Wow. Who knew? And how can you tell, when you get your honey, how can you tell what kind of honey it is? Like whether it's clover honey or mixed honey or anything like that?
I know that has a lot to do with where that they're raised, but
Yeah, it's the color. The color of the
Yes.
honey tells a lot. So a lighter colored honey is sometimes a clover honey. A darker honey is what we call a tree honey. They got pollen from trees. Should usually say stated on the label too what type of honey it is. Like in Florida, you get orange blossom honey and things like that.
Okay, and I believe the resources you provided will help people know where to go to make some purchases if they need to do so. Is that correct?
yes, that is correct. I did want to mention also, thanks to Eric and some others that put some links into the chat box. There's some very good links there, as well as some information that we put into these slides. For those that don't know, if you go to your chat box and you want to save all that information, the three little dots that are to the right of it, if you click on that, you can actually save the full chat there. So if you've not had an opportunity to copy and paste those, you can do that.
And I know that the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services does have some information on where to get bees. So that would be a good place to find that information as well.
And one last question that we'll end with. When you have a hive of bees, about how far will they travel to get their nectar?
They'll travel up to 5 miles.
Okay. And if some of you had some other questions that we weren't able to answer, or if you think of questions later, please contact your local extension office. They have a wealth of information and can steer you in the right direction.
Well, thank you all for attending this session on beekeeping and honey production. We appreciate your participation and also would encourage you to participate in the other webinars that are scheduled each Friday at 2 p.m. Next week, we'll actually be covering shiitake mushrooms. And all of the sessions, both the recordings as well as registration material, you have links here. And as we close, we also be sharing a couple of slides for a short survey, and we'd appreciate your feedback so we can continue to improve our programming and meeting your needs. And thank you again to Amber and Becky and Robbie and Alani, as well as Ruth Wallace for monitoring the question and answers. We hope you have a good day.